You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story isn't from a hiker or a camper. It's from a man who spent over 4 decades behind the wheel of a semi-truck watching America pass by mile after mile. But in the backroads and swamps of Florida, something started watching him back. 5 sightings, 2 encounters, and a truck that shook in the middle of the night with no one in sight. This isn't a legend. It's not a secondhand story. It's a first-hand account from someone who knows what he saw. And this is the story of Eric, the trucker who saw 5. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we have the privilege of talking to Eric today. Eric is an individual who's a listener of the show, but also has had some very interesting things he's experienced over the years being a truck driver. So welcome to the show, Eric. How's it going, man?
Going great so far. Great to be here.
Absolutely. We're hanging out on a Sunday afternoon. It's beautiful up here in Iowa. I hope it's nice where you are as well.
It is now. We had tornadoes last night, so we're doing good now with the sun out.
Oh, man, you made it through. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, before you get going, is there anything that the listeners would need to know for context regarding you being a truck driver, or would it probably be best for you just to launch into sharing what you experienced?
I'll probably just go right into it because of I've had 5 sightings and 2 personal experiences, and I think it'll fill up a lot.
All right, sir. Well, let's make sure you have all the time you have. So feel free to take the mic from here and take us back to when this all started happening for you.
Okay. I took the leisure of writing down dates and times after the first one because I was one of those back in the day who always thought this was a northwestern U.S. and Canada type of thing, and there was nothing around here. I never realized how populated we were with these people, and it was almost like a shock the first time I saw one, which was April 13th, 2016, and that's when I really became a knower. I'd always been a believer because I thought there's just too much evidence in history from back in the Viking days of Nova Scotia, before it was Nova Scotia, through the early days of the country when American Indians and settlers didn't compare notes, yet they had the same sightings of the same beings. There's just too many things like that. And once I realized people really did have artifacts from them, things that they've kept from them that they wanted science to look at, then I started really looking at it more and listening even more. And as of April 13th, one put himself right in my face down in Florida. And I should also say that I'm a resident of Georgia, but all 5 of my sightings and 2 experiences have all been in Florida, because I didn't realize at the time, but I was in a hot zone. And for 4 of those sightings and 2 experiences, it was a hot zone, and also had a sighting 200 miles north of there, still in Florida. So, and which, by the way, was my only daylight sighting as well. But I'd always been a believer. And then on that night, at almost exactly 1 a.m., I had a dedicated run from Atlanta down to Central Florida. And I used to take a couple of back roads and bypasses, which would take me through a swamp. Nice, long, straight, uninterrupted with traffic. Just a great way to go to save time. And with me always looking at trying to avoid wildlife, I'd see the slightest movement anywhere and try to avoid it. But this, I was on a bypass, and it's just about, like I said, just about 1 a.m. I was on a bypass, and there's no streetlights there. It's pitch black. There's no moonlight this night. And A couple of cars were coming towards me. So I cut my brights off. And when I did that, I saw movement to my left of a man running from the left to cross the road. I thought from the right. From to the right. I didn't understand why. This is all a split second thinking too. So as soon as these two cars passed me, as soon as they got to my front bumper, the last one got to my front bumper, I hit my brights, and it was just in time to see this, what I thought was, having hauled hazmat in the past, I know, a Tyvek suit would come to mind immediately, which for anybody that don't know, that's a white one-piece suit to protect you from chemicals. And I see this guy from my left, just like a hurricane. He's running so fast. But when I hit my brights, it was just in time to see him get to the actual highway I'm on and cross in front of me. And he was only, I've said 400 before. I didn't mean to say, in the past when I've told another person about this, I didn't mean to say 400 yards. It's more like 400 feet. He was pretty close. But when he went across the road, I was awestruck, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because what I thought was a man in a Tyvek suit was actually a white-haired, what I thought was a man, run across the road, tall enough to look in the window of my truck without getting on the step, and move in like, I've talked to a guy in Florida about their speed. Saying that he was moving at an ungodly speed just doesn't seem to grasp what you feel when you see it. And he said down here in Florida, we call that psycho speed. And that fits the bill a little bit better. It was psychotic how fast he was moving. But it was slow enough where I'm such a highly perceptive person anyway, that I looked at it, it's like nothing else existed. I just focused right on him because I was in shock and awe. He was colored differently, which 2 of these 5 sightings were colored differently. This one, he was white top to bottom, but it looked like he was wearing black gloves that went up his forearms and black boots that went halfway up his shins. So that confused me a little bit, and I thought that's got to be just mud or something he got on him. And he crossed the road, hit the bushes on the right side, and I didn't know there was a river over there. And after talking to and reporting this sighting to the Florida, they're an international group, but mainly they check on things in Florida. I called them the next night. I looked up to find out who to talk to down there. And the guy that I spoke to that heads it said that he was probably, what they do is run back to where they came from, an area they're most familiar with. And he must have been heading back to that river because they use those as trailways. And, this was kind of new to me too. I didn't know. I've learned a lot about them since 2016, believe me. But at that time, I didn't know that. And he said he would go and check it out. But he said what it was probably was that he had been standing in some real soft riverside swampy mud, and he was probably digging for mussels or who knows what else in there to eat. And he had just come from, the area he was coming from was a farm, a horse farm. So there's no telling what he was coming from and going to. But when I got home the next night, I looked up the number of the Florida group, and I looked up a map and to find out where I was at so I could report it, actually beforehand, before I called them, to tell them where it was. And he told me there was a river there and he'd check it out, film it. He did, and he put it on his website. And when he filmed it, this was a couple of weeks after me and him had spoken on the phone, which I can say that one of his associates called me the next day. And then he called me 2 weeks after that. And then he went down there and filmed it. And of course, there wouldn't be any footprints left if there was before, with the Florida rains off and on sporadically as they come. But what he did find, which he even said in the video, I thought was interesting, he was filming the area, and you can see scrub marks from wild hogs. So there's a lot of wildlife back there, which Florida's got a lot of wild hogs anyway. But where I saw him cross in front of me, when he hit the bushes, that was still there. You could see where he came through those bushes, because when he walked up to film this, he said, well, this is interesting. Look at this. It looked like a tunnel. This tunnel was made up of those like half-inch thick vines with 1-inch thorns on them. And he just blew right through that like it was nothing, and it was still open where he came through. So that made me feel a lot better too, because at the time I was still almost questioning myself, did I really see what I thought I saw? Because he moves so fast, and what I saw just blew me away. That in Florida, I couldn't believe it. And then the coloring that was explained, as I said. And when I got down to the terminal where I was delivering, I played devil's advocate and played ignorance to it. And I asked the terminal manager when he came over to get the bill of lading, I said, do you guys have any white bears down here? And he said, no. And I explained what had happened. And he said, oh, what you saw was a coyote. And I said, coyotes don't run on the back legs that fast or at all. And they're not tall enough to look in the window of my truck. And everybody in the office from the window was quiet. And then there's one guy over in the back corner. He always stares at his computer, never takes his eyes off the screen, never says anything. And he yelled all the way across the room because he had heard our discussion. And he said, what you saw was a skunk egg, and we got a bunch of them down here. And everybody got quiet and looked at me. I looked at them, and I just let the subject drop, and I eased on out, because we all know what I saw. And I don't know if they believe it or not, but I just let it drop and I left. And next night I got the information. The following day from that, I called and spoke to that group, and that all happened as what I explained earlier. And that was that. And the guy he called me 2 more times after that to see if I wanted to talk about it anymore. And one thing he said that I'll never forget that's still true is, he said, once you've seen one, it don't matter if it's 50 years from now, it'll still seem like it was last night. And that being my first one, it definitely did, and definitely does. I still can see it. I still feel it. I still see everything I saw that night, just as if it just happened. And having already written down everything about it, I just had it on a piece of paper to tell the group about it from down there. But that was April 13th. And I was there's an area in the swamp where we as truck drivers, well, preface it this way to say, we as truck drivers have to take a mandatory break after 11 hours of driving. And when I'm close enough to that 11, I'll go ahead and pull over and take my mandatory 10 and at least get that out of the way. And coming out of Florida, especially with 3 different backhauls I have a certain place that I park, which is right there at that swamp. Now that swamp, that particular big swamp is 15 miles from where that sighting was, my first sighting. And I had no idea that was a hot zone as well. I found out later through talking to the head of that group that he said he has a lot of sightings in that area, because we had spoken a number of times after this. He said he has a number of sightings from that area, even from local cops who can't report it, or they'll be thought of as losing their minds and possibly their jobs. So, but he has had some reports from them in the area. And I told him that this was July of 2017. I was sitting there taking my break. It's just a great location for the length of time to get from where I'm at to taking the break and still having time to get over there and get everything done that I need and take off from there the following morning. And I was sitting there doing my paperwork, and I heard a loud pop. I don't know if this is significant or not, but I went ahead and wrote it down because I grabbed that piece of paper with my first sighting on it, and I thought, I better write this down because it could be something, not really thinking too much about it being serious. And I'm still not sure, but I'm sitting there doing my paperwork, and there's such a loud pop not too far from my truck that sounded like a 22 caliber pistol going off. So I looked out the window. You could tell it was fresh wood, in other words. I look out my window, and of course it's pitch black out there, and it's woods and swamp, and I didn't see a flashlight or lantern of anybody who could have been out there. So I didn't know why that would have popped, but I wrote this down and I relate it now because it could be significant. And I started becoming more, I guess at the time I was laughingly saying that I'm so squatch sensitive now that everything, I'm looking at it and listening and watching. And still it could have been. And I told the guy down there about that, and he said, yeah, it could have been. They might have been signaling that you just parked over there. You just never know what the sounds are that they make or why. We don't know enough about the knocks or anything yet exactly. We've got some real good ideas about the knocks now, but that could have been. So I just left that on the list, and just 3 months after that, October the 3rd of 2017, I'm 200 miles north of that swamp, taking another back road that I take up through Central Florida. I take I-10, and then I take another back highway so I can go up through Central Georgia to where I'm delivering back to Atlanta. And there's an agricultural stop we have to make. We call them aggravation stations or ag centers, where we just have to stop and they check to make sure that, what we've got in our trailer before we get up to the state line. And it's a pretty good distance, it's probably, I believe it was about 20 some odd miles from the state line, but it's in a water protected area, conservation area, pastures, and of course, me being, as I said, quote unquote, squatch sensitive now, I'm looking around thinking, yeah, what could exist here? There's food, there's shelter, there's this, there's that. And I went through there so much that 3 of the officers that work there, we'd just wave at each other and I'd go on. They know what I've got. And as I slowed down to get his wave, I saw movement to my left in peripheral vision. And when I looked up real quick, I saw another one. I saw a red one this time. It was the only red one I've seen, the only daylight sighting I've seen. It was another one running at that psychotic speed, and he almost made it without me seeing him. He was so fast. But I jerked my head around quick and saw him just in time. He jumped over a 6-foot fence into the woods, and then he suddenly stopped and slowed down so much. And the reason I say that is that as I was, and I'm still rolling, I'm still doing about 5 miles per hour rolling, and I was at the area that he went into the woods within 2 seconds. It was so close. And I looked in where he went in, and of course I didn't see him. But before that, the reason I know he stopped and went slow is that him being red and the foliage still being pretty green, I saw him moving behind the foliage, and he went real slow, and then he vanished. And as I got to that area, I thought, sure, I'd see him, and he wasn't there. And I thought, look at that. There's another one. And so I wrote that all down. And that was just over a year from the first sighting, April 13th to October 3rd of 17 from 16. And a month after that, going up that same road, I started noticing tree structures, what could have been tree structures, but because now I'm really looking at that area as I go through it and past it. It's a long ride through swamp and pasture and nobody out there, no buildings, no houses or anything, just that ag center. And so I stopped and took a picture of what I thought was the structures. And as I went on past that a couple of 100 yards, a couple of years before that, I would have looked at those trees, the way they were stacked together, and thought, well, they fell in a good synchronized way, I guess, and look over it. But now I don't. I look at it for what it might be. And a couple of 100 yards from there, out in the middle of a palm fronds field, was a tree limb that had been stripped down, and it was horizontally placed on a couple of branches way out in the middle. And I would have thought that why would somebody do that? And I still don't know why. But as I said, being Squatch sensitive, I'm looking at that too and wondering, why is that there? And it still could be something. I don't know. But just things that I picked up and noticed along the way that may or may not mean anything at all. But that was September. 2 months after that, now I'm into November of 2017. I'm going through down to the area where I normally park to take my break on the northbound side. I'm southbound on that same highway, coming to the end where it meets another highway and tees into it. And I make a left right there. And as I'm, cranking up my gears, getting the truck moving, again, I'm always looking for movement, and I see movement to my left, peripheral, from my bright lights being on, because as I said, there's no lights in that area either, rather. And I saw movement to my left just in time for the peripheral of my bright lights to pick up a large, really large, black being turn and walk away. And if he hadn't moved, I would have never seen him. Would have never had any reason to look. But when he moved and walked away, I saw his right arm swing back as he stepped away. And I went, there's another one right there. And look how close he is to where I park. This is like, I think I measured it at 0.2 of a mile from where I normally park. So I know they're right where I usually stay for the night. And now they're really close to home. I'm thinking that this must be a hotter zone than I thought. Because it really looks like it, and I always thought it was. But now there's evidence again. And I didn't mention it to the guys at the terminal anymore. They never said anything else about it to me either. They're just, they're not the guys to talk to about stuff like this. I did talk to one truck driver down there, and he kind of looked at me sideways, and I thought, okay, yeah, there's, it's just the type that don't want to believe it, and they'll start thinking that I'm a wacko. So there's very few people, even family, that I tell anything to, because even some of them that I thought would believe me, they even looked at me kind of quietly, and I thought, okay, well, I won't talk to these family members anymore about it. And in fact, my girlfriend at that time and my oldest sister they believe me. They know me well enough to know I'm not just making up fantasies to talk and draw attention to myself. I'm not that way. My girlfriend is a full-blood American Indian, and in her tribe, they have them. She believes in them. I can't even pronounce what they call them, but she's from an Arizona tribe, and she knows of them very well. And then my sister, of course, she just believes me because she knows me. There were other friends that I told that were semi-so believers, and they still looked at me like, maybe you'll see one out west, but for you to have this many sightings and be right there in Florida, I don't know. It just made me feel like that. They didn't actually say it, but I know them well enough for their looks. So I quit talking to anybody about it, and I haven't even mentioned this to anybody in years. I know I'm a knower. I know they exist, and when I see people online talking about what it could be instead of, I just let it go. That one day people are going to know, and right now it's just, I think more people nowadays know than ever before. I think we've communicated enough now that a lot of people know about them, and the ones that don't know just don't want to believe, and that's their right as well. I would never try to convince anybody, but as far as I can tell, like my family members, they really don't have any reason to believe other than what I've told them, because they're not out and about. And I can also say that if I hadn't been in these certain areas on this job, I would have never seen any. But I happened to be on the right highways and the right locations at the right time, obviously. I don't know if maybe they would have been doing what they were doing anyway, whether I was there or not. But they were obviously in my eyesight and close to me at that time anyway, and they could have waited. That's another question I have about it, is these road crossings I've had and these sightings I've had, why didn't they just wait until I passed, and why would they come out in front of me like that? That always made me wonder too. I still don't have any answers for, really. So after having that third sighting, that was November 15th of 2017. It was 9 months later, October 23rd of 2018. This was at 11:35 p.m. I had another road crossing, and this one, as I came down through that swamp area again, I got to where it tees off, and I make my left, where I just seen a year before that one on the left as I started cranking up my gears. Well, I had gotten up to roughly eighth, ninth gear, so I had pretty good speed going at that time. And that's kind of a dark highway as well. But as you get further up the road, streetlights are starting, and there's some businesses and houses. But before that, there's still a lot of pasture land around there, and there's a painting farm or some type of farm with some animals on it that's advertised on the right. And I see, this is late at night, as I said, 11:35, and so I'm watching all the time, and I see movement again. This is on my right side. So I look, and here is a black one running right towards me. As I'm going up that road, he's coming down the other side towards me, and I'm looking at him as he crosses the road, of course, taking in all the characteristics I can of him. And this one's also colored strange, but he's a black one with a gray face. I could see. I didn't have my glasses on at that time, but I could still tell. I was close enough to tell that he was gray faced and black. He was running on all fours, and I wouldn't say it was the psychotic speed I had seen twice, but this was very fast. But when he crossed the road, I noticed he had a white side. And without my glasses on, thinking about it later, I was thinking that, well, he came from that petting zoo. Maybe he had a goat under his left arm. He was carrying like a football. Maybe he had a Labrador, a sheep, a pig. And he was just far enough away that I couldn't really tell. But he was close enough that I could tell that. I couldn't get details, but I got characteristics. And as I got up to where he crossed the road, he went across. When I reported that one to the same Florida group, the guy said, well, there's a 3-foot barbed wire fence right there where he crossed. Did he jump at all? And I said, as a matter of fact, he didn't jump. He ran across that fence like it was an open gate. That's just how big he was. And he was built like a football player wearing pads. He was huge. And as he came barreling towards me, I was taking all this in. And as he crossed the road, I've got so used to this now, you could say, that as he crossed the road, I remember saying to myself out loud, oh, look, there goes another one of those things they say don't exist. And there he goes. I watched him cross. No moonlight out, but when he got into that pasture area, he went into an island of trees, and I couldn't see him, but I could see his white side. And once the white side disappeared, I knew he was in the trees pretty thick. So if he didn't have a white patch on his side and he was standing there at night, I would have never seen him. There's no telling how many had been around me and I didn't even know about it. But that characteristic gave him away like he was running with a spotlight on his side. And it was this whole rib cage. And I've heard since then that there's been some seen with a big white patch on their back and on the chest area. So it could have been that. I don't know. I just don't know what it was. It's just funny that he was coming from a zoo or a farm rather. And he had that white side. So it made me think that's all. I mean, I really don't know. And I reported that one, and the head of that group again, he went out there and he said he sat. And that's also, let me say this also, that is right at some power lines. And he said that power line area is a very hot area for them to travel. So, like I said before too, I'm in a hot zone without even realizing it. They're all around me down there, which is why I never got out of my truck at night. At one time I did before I knew this, but after these sightings and the things that are going on down there, I just quit getting out at night. I hadn't really no reason except to wait until the morning daylight or close to daylight with my strong flashlight. So he said when he went down there to check it out that he sat for 2 hours on the side of the road watching and waiting, and he talked to some people that had that lived close by, not in that area, but lived close by. And he talked to a few people at the first sighting as well and left his card with them, but just to let them know that he was on their property looking around. And but he said again he didn't see anything, and that was another area where the cops have reported seeing them as well. So it's good to know that somebody in law enforcement has seen the same things I've seen. But as I said before too, I'm a believer now. I mean, I'm a knower now, and I wasn't even thrilled to see that one as big of a deal as that was. I just saw him like I was watching, anybody's horse had gotten out and he ran across the road. There goes a horse. It just wasn't that thrilling. It was exciting to see, but I'm calm about it now. And so anyway, that was my fourth one, and that was 2018. The fifth one went all the way up to January 26th of 2022. And this happened at 2 a.m. Again, the same area, that swamp. As I'm coming down to where the roads tee off, I had always thought that pasture area across where the highway tees into the next highway looked like a great place for one. So for those next 3 years or so, every time I made that stop right there, I'd hit my bright lights when there were no cars around, where it would my lights would sweep across that field because it's pitch black out there. But I've seen it in the daytime. I know what's there. And as my lights would sweep across, I could see, a deer once in a while and a cow once in a while. There wasn't a lot of cows out there. And I would just sweep it and go on. Well, this night of January 26th, when I made the sweep, I saw like a bright neon lights beaming off of it. I saw a white one, another white one. And it was, now this was also the creepiest one of all. For some reason, he was probably at least 300 yards away. You know, he wasn't real close, but I know enough about their characteristics now. When I see one, I know one. And it was a white one. He was standing slightly turned to the right, but towards me, and he was leaning over just a little bit. And he was just standing there like a statue. And as I made the sweep, I went, look at that. There, out, speaking out loud to myself. I talk to myself a lot. But I said, look at that. There's another one. And without my bright lights, once my lights had passed him, I couldn't see him anymore. It's so pitch dark out there. So I leaned forward and looked out my passenger side window because I couldn't see him. And it's pitch black. There's no way to see him. Without my bright lights, I would have never known he was there either, even though he's completely white. And I reported that one to the guy as well, to the group. But that one was the creepiest one for some reason. And I've heard about them projecting things into people like confusion and fear and things like that. So I think this one was possibly just reaching me and saying that I'm not safe. Don't stop. Don't come over here. Who knows what or what reason why. But even though he wasn't moving, he was just standing there looking at me. I had a real crazy feeling about him, and I was glad to leave him behind and keep on going up the road because that was very strange. So that was my 5 sightings, and I've had 2 other experiences, which is the reason I don't run Florida anymore. Besides having sightings, which some people would get away from it all because of that, that kind of fascinated me, but I didn't want to get too close to be one of the people I've heard on their sightings where they've run into them in the woods, or they've almost bumped into them, or they were 20 feet from them, and that kind of thing. I can only imagine how terrifying that could be to anybody. When I've seen the sheer size and the bulkiness and thickness of these beings at a safe distance, I've had the kind of sightings that most people wish they could have, where they could just see them from their vehicle and keep going. Thankfully, all 5 of my sightings have been like that. But right there again at that hot swamp, coming back where I take my break, where I heard the pop before, I pulled in there on June 16th of 22. So this is 5 months roughly after seeing that white one. And that's always been a safe place to park. The trucks line up there bumper to bumper on both sides of that highway, especially on the southbound side. But on the northbound side, we have a limited amount of space, and we might have maybe 8 tractor trailer combinations in there, bumper to bumper, pretty close. And that's all the room there is. Whereas the other side goes for a few tenths of a mile. And it's further up. It's not right beside us. It's further up. So we're kind of we're on this side of the road by ourselves. But it's always been a safe place to park. And it's such a safe place that even though it's out in the public, what I do when I shut down for the night, when I, turn lights out and the motor off and everything, or leave it on for that matter, I always cover my eyes and ears. What I do is I take a dish towel and fold it in half and cover my eyes and ears for complete and total darkness, just in case any lights hit me. And then I take my gun range ear covers and put them over the towel over my ears. And it holds the towel there, and it's very nice and quiet and peaceful where I can sleep good. I can barely hear cars driving past me. And I don't wear that kind of what I call a rig just everywhere. And if I'm in questionable place where I've got to shut down for the night on a side road or entrance, exit ramp somewhere. I don't do that. And it's not a very good night's sleep either. But there, just like a rest area, I put the rig on and I'm lights out. But anyway, before that, I pulled into that swamp and I shut down and thinking everything's normal as it ever is. And I'm standing between the seats with the lights on and I'm reading an inspection report that was just done on my motor because I try to improve each time I have a PM done on the motor. I try to see if my idle time's better, mileage is better per mile, etc. So I like to read over it and compare them. And I'm standing there between the seats reading over that one, and my whole truck rocked. And it wasn't what some of my coworkers, I told some of the guys about that because they parked down there. I said, you guys be careful when you park down there because somebody rocked my truck the other night. And I never told any of them what I know it was. But they said, oh, no, it's just your airbags releasing. They'll tremble a little bit. And I said, I've been driving almost 42 years. I'm 62 years old. I started driving in the early 80s. I know what airbags feel like when they release at this stage of the game. You know, they'll give you a little shudder while the air's coming out of them. But this, and also I told them my motor wasn't even running. I mean, my motor was still running, so there was no reason for the airbags to release. So it wasn't that anyway. But whatever did this, I was telling them, rocked my truck so hard that I took one hand to clutch my seat because I was rocking inside like that. And I was so shocked by that, I immediately cut the light out and looked out the window, and of course, nothing was there. And that was not a very good night's sleep that night because that had never happened, and I'd never heard of it happening. And so I didn't park down there again. Next morning when I left, when I came back down a couple of days later, I didn't park there. I'd go past that highway 20 more miles up to the interstate where I knew of a good rest area and I could shut down. And I did that for a few months. But when I went past that area, funny thing was, when I went past that highway and looked, there might be only one or two trucks parked there. So I started wondering, well, maybe some of my neighbors have been getting harassed there too, and we don't know each other. We wouldn't have any reason to, have a coffee break there and talk about it. So this went on for weeks. When I went past there, nobody hardly was there. And I wasn't going to stop again. I never parked there on weekends, but even during the week, I just went on past it. And I finally got my gumption up again. That happened June 16th of 22. Well, September 8th of 22. Let me back up. At the end of August, I went there and nothing happened. So I thought everything was okay. Whatever did that must have been a fluke. I don't know what kind of fluke it could have been, but maybe I won't be bothered anymore, even though I know what did it. Well, September 8th was the second time parking there from my initial return. And everything was fine. I had put the lights out, motors off. I put my rig on, and I was I was in such a deep sleep I was dreaming. And my truck got rocked so hard that my head was bouncing and rolling around on the pillow. And I was in such a state while I was dreaming that just a few years before that, we'd had a tornado where I was living at the time. And my wife couldn't wake me up. She had ran upstairs and she was bouncing my head on the pillow. I was under a sleeping pill. I should take those once in a while. And that night I had taken a sleeping pill. And she was bouncing my head on the pillow. And she said, "This is the third time I've came up here. You got to get out of here. The tornado, they just said the tornado's almost here. Get down to the basement where we're at." And then I slowly fell out of the bed and got up. And anyway, when my truck was being rocked, I was dreaming that I was in that place again with my wife bouncing me, trying to wake me up. That's how hard the rocking was. I immediately tore the rig off, kind of cussing, because now I was getting irritated with it. I jumped up out of the bed and looked out the window, and nothing's there, of course, which made me even more mad, because I thought, these things are harassing me now. And I had already tested the springs on the truck, trying to recreate what happened the first time. And I'm 265 pounds, I'm 6'2", and I had gotten up on the side step and grabbed the monkey bar, and I had bounced up and down, pulling on it. I'd push on it, I'd shake it, and I can barely move those springs, which I knew would happen. The suspension is huge on these trucks. But whatever was shaking me was shaking it like you would rock any, like a motorcycle, like you're bouncing up and down on a little dirt bike. It was rocking me so hard. And I thought, that's it. I'm not coming here anymore. This is it. But I was mad. I wasn't afraid. So what I did was throw my rig back on and go back to sleep. I mean, not long before that, I would have never done that. But I was more mad than anything else. And I kept going down there. But another thing I heard about was the Chippewa will, before they go into the woods, the Ojibs and Chippewa would speak to the beings and say, "I'm coming in because I have to hunt, et cetera, et cetera. Don't bother us. We're not here for anything, et cetera." Sort of apologizing as they come into the wood line. And I thought, I'm going to do that. I'm going to park down there. And I started doing it. When I parked there, I would just roll my window down and talk to the darkness. And just tell them, I'm only here because I have to be. Don't scare me tonight. I'm not here to bother you. I'm only here because I have to be. As soon as I get my rest, I'll be gone. And I did that for the last few times I was there until I got another run, because what I did was I talked to my dispatch about changing locations, because I'd been running that same area for so many years, and all over Florida for that matter, but especially that area. That as of August last year, I started running North and South Carolina instead, because I thought they're getting too close to me now, and I don't want to get any closer and have to find out what to do next time. And I don't know what might be the next time, what might happen. And I'll just leave this as a peaceful getaway. You all keep living as you're living, and I'm going up here to live as I live. Which, by the way, I had been invited twice because of these sightings. I'd been invited twice by people to go down and camp and do some trailing and tracking, and I refused both times. I don't have any use for that. I'm not a researcher, and I don't want to be one, and I don't want to bother them anyway. So it's not anything that I would look forward and try to do. I just wouldn't want to bother them in any way. You know, if I was hunting and I ran into some by accident, that's one thing, but to actually camp and look for them, I don't want to do that. I have no reason. And I just left it. Live as you live, and I'm going to go live as I live. And let's have a peaceful separation forever, I hope. And I'd say that's it. That's my experiences in Florida, all in Florida, by the way.
Eric, that is an incredible grouping of encounters, and so interesting. You're a truck driver as well. I want to comment real quick. A lot of truck drivers reach out to me. They don't come on record. Um, there's more out there that's happening than people realize when it comes to truck drivers seeing Bigfoot. It's a lot. So it's very unique that you've come on record, and thank you for doing so. There's something you said at the very beginning that I thought was interesting because you said it really quick. You may not have even noticed that you said it, but I'm just curious. So you refer to them as people, is what I heard, correct?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
What was it? Was what made you get to the point where you now refer to them as people as opposed to like a skunk ape or Bigfoot or Sasquatch?
The main thing that made me, even even though I've never personally heard this, it was their speech they have where they communicate with each other. And I've heard there's family units and small clans, and they try not to bother us like any other animal or person pretty much would do, but unless they're threatened. But the speech and communication, what I've heard about, and I've heard the recordings from Ron in California. In fact, I heard them again the other day. That they're built like us, just more extreme, but they communicate. They're built like us. They've got the same body parts we do. So why wouldn't they have the same family units? And it makes me think of them as just that, as people, as groups of a different, huge strain of people. That's all. That's all it is.
Gotcha. It's very interesting, especially. I mean, when you think of there's some times when they've been referred to as like the wild man, and there might be something to that. Think of what would happen if we were put in a wooded situation for years and years and years. What would happen to us eventually? I mean, who
True.
knows, right? But it might bring us back to a certain way of living.
There's no telling. There's absolutely no way of telling that. But
Yeah,
yeah, I agree.
it would be an interesting experiment. I don't know if it'll ever be done, but um, you mentioned that you see them move like psycho speed fast, which is a really interesting way to say that. But I think it definitely gets the point across. Have you ever seen anything else move that psycho speed fast? And this can even be in like a movie or a TV show. Anything else that comes close to what you would see?
Yeah, the only thing I could compare it to is that I've thought about this beforehand. Back then was Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom I grew up on. They would show a leopard running in slow motion where you would see a blur behind him and then they would let it go at actual speed. It reminds me of that. It's just lightning, super fast. And I couldn't believe, and it's still hard to believe, that a being that's that size can move that quickly. It's no doubt that they are the greatest athlete in the world with their strength and speed. Who could match that? Or what could match that? And I've also heard witnesses say out in Alaska that they had seen a squatch standing at the end of a wood line. And these guys, they were some type of a tribe in Alaska, and they were in a canoe coming up on the shoreline. So they stopped when they saw the squatch on the left side, and they could just see him in the shadows. But to the right, they also stopped because a grizzly bear was just taking his time on all fours, walking down the shoreline. So they stopped and looked and watched, and that grizzly sniffed the air, and without missing any of his stride, he did a U-turn and just sauntered down the other way, like, I don't want to go down there. So, and I've heard about them easily killing black bears, but I've also heard of them killing and breaking the necks of grizzlies. So as fast as they are and strong as they are, there's no match for them. But the speed is it's just funny. When I talked to the guy in Florida, he said that's what we say down here. It's psychotic speed. And I said, man, you hit it right on the nail head, because I've said ungodly a lot. It's like, that just don't quite get it. Are super fast. Nothing reaches me like psycho speed does, because it's, another guy said that it reminds him of back in the black and white movie days of Dracula, when they used to have Friday night fright videos on of different characters like that, that you would see you would see Dracula, and then so he would disappear and then reappear a split second 30 feet away. He said it's kind of like that, like they just not vanish and reappear, but they move so fast it's almost like that. But I agree that it's just the word psycho just grabs me where it needs. Characteristically, their speed is like that.
Those are some really interesting ways to describe it, and I think those are new ones to the show. Thank you for digging deep,
Well, that's good.
those are pretty cool. I want to clarify something about your sightings that you've had. Was there ever a time where you were able to see any details of the face or anything like that?
No, I wish there was, but I was never. They were never moving slow enough, or it was too dark, and I wasn't close enough to actually see that. I've seen the faces from profile, and the one on all fours running towards me, I could tell his face was gray, but I couldn't see detail. And again, I wasn't wearing my glasses that night either.
Right, makes sense. Is so what you had seen at different times, after, let's say you see the Patterson Gimlin film or the Patty film, was it similar at all to that, or a completely different from what you saw?
Now, the one on all fours would have been her size, just a huge barrel with limbs running towards me. The one that made a when I saw him turn and walk away, he was that big also. The red one I saw run across the road and jump the 6-foot fence was smaller, and he might have been a 6-footer. He just wasn't one of those mega huge ones. He wasn't even as thick as them, but he was at least 6 feet, I'd say. The white one that my very first sighting, he had to be at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. But it was such a quick sighting, and my first one, I could only compare it to him being able to look in my truck without stepping up. We could be eye to eye with me sitting in the seat. So he might have been a little more than 7 feet. And the white one that was way out in the pasture, I couldn't tell, but he was pretty thick. I could tell he wasn't just tall and skinny, because he was standing there, and I could see him for a few seconds as my lights went past him.
Do you think, let's say, man, I mean, something that could rock the entire truck, that's big. That's a lot of force. Do you think they could have actually gotten inside the truck if they wanted to?
Easily. I think with the limbs and trees that they break, if they really wanted me, it's so amazing that they aren't more. I mean, they could, if they wanted to, they could be as violent and wipe us out, I believe. If I drove past that one that was standing there and it turned and walked away, never knowing he was there, if he wanted to, he could have easily snatched the door off my truck and snatched me out if he wanted to. I have no doubt about that. As strong as they are, and as we're almost feeble compared to them. There's nothing we have physically to outmatch them. and their strength is really ungodly. I can use the word for that.
It makes me wonder, and man, if you could only get inside their heads and know what they think when all of a sudden out of the darkness this massive truck comes flying out of nowhere. It's like, do they know it's a vehicle like a little, well, a little Subaru Outback or something like that is a totally different vehicle as opposed to a huge, truck you're driving. And I wonder if they, man, it would be fascinating to get inside their head for a few different reasons. But I wonder if they're
Yeah,
looking
no
at
doubt.
a truck as like a huge enemy, or just they're aware, yeah, one of those weird, you know, those human creatures are in there. They've just, decided they've figured out how to control it. It's one of those thinking out loud things. But you know,
Right.
seeing being able to have multiple sightings, was there a thing that you realize is like, as soon as you saw this one thing about them or noticed the way that they were acting, you're like, oh, it's 100%. It's another one of these people from the woods.
A certain characteristic.
Yeah.
Um, well, first of all, the color, because I've only seen three different colors, and when I see what I think is one, and it's one of those three colors, and they're as big as they are from top to bottom, I think that's no human. There's no there's no man or woman that big and that thick and moving that fast, or like the last sighting, the white one so big and thick just standing there, out in the middle of a pitch black field. The things, just seeing them move and even standing there, and just the overall feeling I get from looking at them, that I know that's not a human. In fact, I've seen, when I saw that white one just a few days after that, there was, and I've never seen this before either. When I made that, I continued making that sweep with my headlights when I made that left turn. But when I got down to the end of that swamp road to make the left, there was a couple of, this was at midnight, there were a couple of cars, I mean trucks, pickup trucks with their headlights on, parked out there in the middle of the field. And who knows what they were doing and why. Maybe there was uh, something going on with the cattle, or the farm animals were found over there. It makes me wonder a lot. But that was unusual. But as far as seeing them, that's all I can say. Is just their size and the color. I've seen two black ones, two white ones, and the red one in the daylight. So anytime I see that, right then, I go right to, there they are. There's another one. But when I had the fourth sight and he crossed the road in front of me on all fours, like I said, I'm just not excited that much by then, and I just say, look at that, there he goes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They don't exist, but there he goes again. There goes another one, rather.
Right. They sure not are out here, and they're all over the place. Yeah, that's funny. Um, Sometimes people report that they have interactions like this, and it will things will start to manifest at their home. Have Has anything like that ever occurred after you've had these interactions in the truck?
No, not at all. And I had been aware of that,
Yeah.
and hoping that wouldn't happen to me. I've heard about them attaching themselves in some way like that. And back when I was wondering all the time, I think about it every day, especially when I was down there. I would look in the woods constantly, um, for any movement. And I had really hoped that they wouldn't let that happen to me. Like and when I did my speeches, I call them speeches, when I have my little saying down there before I go to sleep at night to them, I would say that would be one of the things I would say is don't go with me. Just stay where you're at. I'm not here to bother you, et cetera, et cetera. I had my own little thing that I would say like that. And thankfully, no, nothing that ever happened.
Eric, that's a really big detail. I wonder that's got to have something to do with it. How you're like, hey, you know, don't cross the boundary. You know, please stay where you are. I honestly
Yes.
think there's something to what you did and how you haven't experienced that. That's the super interesting. It'll be interesting to hear if people that listen to this episode. I know that we're staying vague as to the swamp and the hot zone and all that, which is more than okay. But I'm sure that some truck drivers will probably be like, I know exactly. And yeah, I've had weird stuff too. If you guys don't want to put it in the comments for not putting it out there, and being public about it, you always can you can reach out to me if you'd like as well. You send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I know there's a lot of truck driver stuff happening, but sometimes you guys want to stay in the shadows, and that's more than okay. So
that'd be great. And another reason I don't say anything about that is not only to keep the general public away from it, but it's also there's different groups that have that as a research area. So I didn't want to throw it out there for everybody. But once I mentioned about where we park and how we park, it probably is an indicator. But I had to say that because after that first episode of Shaking My Truck, it dissipated. There just weren't many trucks there, if any, some nights. So once I started seeing the crowd come back, I went back, and it took a few weeks. So there must be somebody else who've had some experiences down there.
that is so interesting. Oh, this is kind of a weird thing, but it just popped in my head. I don't know a lot about the trucker life, but I know a little bit, mainly what I've pulled from old movies. Did you ever reach out? Well, first off, do they still have like CB radios in trucks?
Yes.
Okay.
I still use them.
Do you ever reach out when you're in a certain area and be like, hey, did anyone else experience that or just see that or anything like that?
No, I never did that.
Okay.
I never did that any more than talking to them in person.
Okay.
Even though that would be a little more incognito, I just got kind of the cold shoulder enough that I didn't mention it anymore to anybody. And my the lead mechanic where I work, I'd mentioned to him that I'd been shook down there. And he's another one that's kind of looking at me strange, but he was a little more understanding. He said, well, it is kind of strange that in all the years you've been driving, it never happened before, and it only happened down at the swamp. I said, okay, that's a good point right there. And another driver was standing close by, and he was one of those that was kind of looking like, there's nothing going on down there. You know, that's what they want to believe, but I've experienced it, and I'm not going to try to convince him. Just go ahead, keep parking down there and see if it happens to you. Is how I feel about it. I'm not down there anymore now, but I know what's there, visually and experiencing it.
Eric, this has been just a really fun conversation. Learned a lot about. Don't talk a lot about Florida stuff, so I'm glad that you came on. As we start to wrap up our time, I want to make sure that you were able to get everything shared that you had wanted to share on the show today, and there's nothing else that you wanted to make sure you got out there.
Yeah, I think that's it because what I did was get my notes just for this show. It was real easy. I didn't have to really try to recall anything. I've got everything right there with the dates and times and locations. And so no, that's it. I've said it all.
That's awesome.
That's about it.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Eric. I have a few more, like one or two more questions for you, but I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you seriously to all of you listening to the Bigfoot Society podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss an episode. And hey, if this story gave you chills or made you think about Florida swamps twice, please share it with a friend. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure you're following the show and leave a quick review. It helps more than you know. And listen, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in places like Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge, Sweet Home, Oak Ridge, anywhere in that Subtle Lake area, shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your account. And don't forget, Sasquatch Summerfest is coming up July 11th through the 12th at Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. You can get a 2-day ticket for the price of one when you use the code BFS, short for Bigfoot Society, at www.sasquatchsummerfest.com. Huge thanks to Priscilla for hooking that up for our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't there.